Now, the French socialist candidates in the primaries, they had their third and final debate last night. And how did that go down then in the papers? What do they make of that?
Well, Francois seems to think the race's frontrunner, François Hollande, has got a little bit ahead of himself. They've got him posing as president on the front page. Of course, they've photoshopped that, but their headline says he already sees himself in that office, but it's all still to play for. So they reckon really that his performance last night in the debate was a little bit ahead of himself. He's already making presidential speeches, they say, but he's kind of forgetting to get bogged down in the policy detail of what actually differentiates him from the other socialist candidates. So if you're a bit lost as to what those details actually are, the Le Parisien has quite a good cheats guide to what the policy differences are between those six candidates who, of course, face off in the first round of the socialist primary on Sunday. So they say what marked the difference last night was that Martine Aubry especially, who is coming second in those polls at the moment behind Hollande, was much more focused on her policies and much better at selling her experience. Of course, she has a lot more in terms of holding elected offices than Hollande does. So that's one dividing line, they say. And also there are some concrete differences. She says you just can't cut the deficit as quickly as he would like to, whereas on the other hand she's quite keen to pull out of nuclear energy quite quickly, whereas he says that France is just too dependent. That's impossible. The Le Parisien also criticises all six candidates for not touching at all on a number of subjects that are important to French voters in all of these three debates they've had. They said they've hardly talked about education, they've not talked about housing. House prices, of course, are a huge concern to lots of French people, and they've not talked about foreign policy, so we don't quite know how any of them would deal with France's international partners as they became president.
They did, though, talk about the economy, and that's, of course, making headlines still.
Yes, they've talked a lot about the deficit and how quickly we should cut it, and of course the problems of French banks who might need recapitalising again. This makes the front page of business paper Les Echos. Their headline is European leaders start again from scratch on the euro crisis. What they're talking about is that they say leaders need to go back to the drawing board because their latest measure, which was that €440 billion extension to the European Financial Stability Fund announced back in July, that's not going to be enough money to recapitalise French and other European banks in the case that Greece defaults and they need huge losses. So they say they've got to force those banks to take bigger write-downs on those Greek debts, otherwise the European governments just won't be able to bail them out. This story also makes the front page of Libération. They've got European states regulate the banks on their front page. Now, what they're talking about is, again, this issue of recapitalisation, but Libération's editorial is quite strongly worded today. They say the European governments just cannot be expected to bail out banks again like they did in 2008 without expecting the banks to take some bigger losses as well. They've got to take more write-downs on those debts, they say, because we're still dealing with a structural problem that dates back to 2008 when the banks didn't change the way that they behaved.
And Le Figaro goes to Greece to take a look at how the austerity measures are going down.
Yes, they've got Greece in the process of imploding as a front page. Of course, they're talking about all the demonstrators that took to the streets this week. But they say the fundamental problem is that people are just ignoring the austerity measures passed by Papandreou's government. A third of Greece's GDP is in the black economy anyway, so people know plenty of ways to get around rules passed by the government. They talk about shopkeepers who do fake receipts for their customers so that they don't have to pay the new VAT increase. And they say the defiance against Papandreou's government is soaring.
Quite a lot of violence in the streets of Athens as well yesterday. Thank you very much for that look at the French newspapers, Elena Cassis. A reminder now of our top story.